let's talk about something that affects pretty much all of us, but let's be honest, can feel super complicated. Malaysian tax. If you're starting from scratch, don't worry, you're in exactly the right place. We're going to break it all down right from the very beginning.
Seriously, you've been there, right? You look at your pay slip, you see that tax deduction, and you just think, where is that money actually going? It's a question we've all asked, and it's the perfect place for us to start.
So let's just strip it all back to the absolute basics. Before we get into the who, how, or when, we need to answer the biggest question of all. What even is tax?
You know, at its heart, it's actually pretty simple. Taxation is just the government's way of collecting money to run the country. Think of it like a fee or an assessment that's placed on a whole bunch of different activities and items.
And yeah, it's not just about your salary. The government taxes all sorts of things. The profits a business makes, that license you need to drive your car, yep, that's road tax, and even surprise money, like if you happen to win the lottery. All of it goes into one big pot for the country.
Okay, but why do we pay it? Well, this is where it gets really interesting because tax has two big jobs. On one hand, you've got the economic reasons. This is the money that builds our roads and schools, it funds government spending, it encourages investment. But then there's the social side. Tax can be used to redistribute wealth, encourage people to donate to charity, and even, influence our behavior. Think about it. Higher taxes on things like smoking and drinking alcohol, that's done on purpose to make them a bit less attractive.
All right, so we get what tax is and why it's there. But here's the thing. Not all taxes are paid in the same way. And that brings us to the two main types you really need to know about.
As you can see here, pretty much every tax falls into one of two big buckets: direct taxes and indirect taxes. And the real difference is just, how does the money get from your pocket to the government?
So here's the main takeaway. A direct tax is, well, direct. It goes straight from you to the authorities. Your income tax is a perfect example, or the tax you pay when you sell a property. But an indirect tax, you pay it through a middleman, like a shop or a restaurant. You're paying them, and then they pass it on to the government. This is exactly how things like sales tax or service tax work.
Okay, so we've got the types of tax down. But who's in charge of all this? And what rule book are they playing from? Let's meet the players and find out about the rules.
So in Malaysia, there are basically three main departments running the show. First up, you have the Treasury, which is part of the Ministry of Finance. These are the policymakers, the ones who design the system. Then you have the collectors. For direct taxes, like your income tax, that's the Inland Revenue Board, or LHDN. And for indirect taxes, you've got the Royal Malaysian Customs Department.
Okay, so those are the players, but they can't just do whatever they want, right? There has to be a rule book. So what is it?
Well, the rules actually come in three levels, kind of like a pyramid. At the very top, the most powerful level is statute law. These are the supreme rules, the actual written laws passed by our parliament. One step down from that, you have case law. These are decisions that are made in court. And at the bottom, you have IRB practices. These are the official day-to-day guidelines from the tax department itself.
And when we talk about that top level, statute law, there is one rulebook that's more important than any other, the Income Tax Act of 1967. Pretty much everything is built on top of this.
I absolutely love this analogy. If the big law, the statute law, is the official rulebook for a game, then case law is like a referee's decision. You know, when there's a tricky play and the ref has to make a call? That call sets a precedent. From that moment on, every time that same situation happens in future games, everyone has to follow that referee's decision. That's exactly what case law does for taxes.
And speaking of rules and referees, this brings us to a super important point. There is a right way and a very, very illegal way to handle your taxes.
This slide lays it out perfectly. On one side, you have tax avoidance. This is totally legal. It's about using the rules as they're written to minimize how much tax you pay. A good example is restructuring a business to take advantage of tax reliefs that are already available. But on the other side, you have tax evasion. This is illegal. Plain and supple. This is when you deliberately break the law, like, for instance, hiding income you've earned. And trust me, the consequences are no joke. We're talking big fines or even prison time.
Okay, let's zoom in a bit. We've looked at the big picture. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of the tax most of us deal with, the income tax system here in Malaysia.
So, the most basic rule you need to know is this. Malaysia's tax system is territorial, and what that means is that tax is charged on income that you make in Malaysia or income from overseas that you receive in Malaysia. It's all about location.
And the law gets really specific about what in Malaysia actually covers. It's not just the land we're standing on.
Think of it like a 3D box. It includes our territorial waters, the seabed, and even the subsoil, so everything underground and underwater. It also includes the airspace way up above us, and any special areas where we have the rights to explore for natural resources. It's the whole shebang.
So, what kind of income actually gets taxed? Well, the law sorts everything into different buckets. You've got your business profits in one bucket, your salary from your job in another, then things like dividends and interest, rent and royalties, pensions, you get the idea. Each bucket has its own set of rules.
Now, there are also special rules for people who don't live here, non-residents. For some types of income they earn from Malaysia, they pay something called withholding tax. It's pretty much what it sounds like. The person paying the non-resident has to withhold or hold back a part of that payment for tax and give it straight to the government. A classic example is if they're renting out movable property here, like a big ship or a construction crane.
Okay, so what about money you earn overseas and then bring back to Malaysia? Here's the general rule, and it's a big one. For most people, that foreign income is actually exempt from Malaysian tax. That's a really important point to remember.
But, and this is a huge but, there's a major exception to that rule. That exemption for foreign income, it does not apply to resident companies in a few very specific industries. We're talking banking, insurance, and sea or air transport. For them, it's a different story. They get taxed on what's called a world scope basis, which means their global income can be taxed here in Malaysia.
And there we have it. We've gone from the absolute basics of what tax even is, all the way to the details of our income tax system. We've covered a ton of ground, but really, this is just scratching the surface. So, I'll leave you with this question. Now that you've got the fundamentals down, what's one thing about tax that you're still curious about?
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Dore's Shelf.